Welcome to the Life Unlimited podcast with Larry Heller. You deserve complete financial advice so you can confidently live your life your way, for life. Now, let's get into this week's podcast episode.
Hello and welcome to another Life Unlimited podcast with your host, Larry Heller. Now, I've done a lot of shows. Larry and I were just talking about this, and we're going to talk about something today I really don't know that much about. There have been some rule changes with 529 plans, so we're going to dive into 529 plans to a Roth IRA rollover. Larry, I didn't even know you could do this.
Yeah, well, this is pretty new in the Secure 2.0 Act. And it's kind of interesting because it's meant for one purpose, but there's a couple other purposes and a couple other ways that you can use this if you want to. So just to refresh everyone's memories, and I'm sure people that are tuning in know that a 529 plan is a way to save for education, either college or some at this point they also allowed from other secondary degrees. And you can put money away. The money can grow for you tax-free, and if used for qualified purposes when you withdraw it, there's no tax penalties, and there's no taxes, and there's no penalties as well. So it's a great way of saving traditionally for children's educations. But sometimes people have come, have asked us, or we've seen, well, I don't want to overfund this 520 and be stuck with money in this plan. And yes, that is part of the risk that you have, that maybe the account has grown more than what it ends up costing your child to go to school, or maybe they got a partial or a full-time scholarship. And yes, you can keep the 529s. You can transfer it to a certain family member, or a lot of times we've actually had clients that have just said, let's just keep it, and eventually I'll transfer this account to my kids and they'll use it for their grandkids, which is perfectly, you're able to do that. However, the government has now addressed that if you do have some money left over, they've introduced through Secure 2.0 Act that you're able to now have the beneficiary roll this money into a Roth account for them. So it comes with a lot of limitations. So we'll go through some of the limitations and some of the implications of them. So, but I think everyone should be aware of this, and whether they're left over with a 529 or if they want to proactively plan for this. So that's the interesting part, which we'll get to at the end, that they can actually do some great things for their kids if they want, by actually planning for the actual overfunding to be used as a rollover for a Roth. So let's go through the limitations. So key limitations: the 529 plan must be opened and maintained for 15 years. So you can't just say, oh, I'm going to put this plan in place and be able to do some of this. So that's, key limitation number one. Key limitation number two, any funds that are going to be moved into a rollover, into an IRA Roth rollover, had to have been put into the 529 for at least 5 years ago. So you can't just put money in the 529 in year one and then in year two use that as a rollover for a Roth IRA. And then also, the rollovers cannot exceed the IRA contribution limit for the year. So for most people that are under 50, that limit right now is $7,000. So you can't roll over more than $7,000 in 1 year. If you are over 50, you can do $8,000. And the lifetime rollover limit is $35,000. So nothing more than $35,000. But this is per account, per individual child. So if you have multiple children, each one has their own limits.
All right, I need to pause you, Larry, because
Yep.
I'm sorry, I just have a question just knocking around in my brain. What's up with these numbers? Why 15 years? Why 35,000? Do you know? I mean, they seem arbitrary, don't they?
Well, they're a little arbitrary, but when we talk through some of the planning rules in here, the reason why they were like this, they didn't want to say, Okay, because you can do this for anybody. So if, let's say you're 25 and somebody wants to just put in $35,000 and the next year roll over 35,000 into a Roth. So they wanted to prevent people from being able to do that and using this really as a loophole to fund a Roth IRA for somebody. So
Got it.
that's why they put this in place, that they really want it to be geared for people that have done the right planning for college for 15 years and have excess funds.
Okay.
So and they didn't want, they did the 5-year look because they didn't want people putting it, if they had it for 15 years and said, oh, I'm done with college, but you know what? I'll throw 35,000 in here, and then I'll use this to help my kids the next year and just do a Roth. So those are the reasons why they have some of these time limits in here.
Got it. All right. So let's dive into the implications and the limits of these rules,
Yeah.
right?
So that's kind of where we're going with the question you just asked. It's not supposed to be used as a loophole for a large tax-free gift. So they've limited the usefulness as a planning tool by putting in these rollover conditions. And then obviously any 529, any excess funds that are not used for qualified expenses are still subject for taxes and penalties. So, but what you can do here is use some of these rules here as a strategic use to do a Roth rollover within the rules. So if you're, if you want to get some more money out of your name for estate purposes, or you want to help your beneficiaries, boost their retirement accounts. So not just doing this for education, but you can also do this to helping them in retirement. A lot of parents, I understand, are not going to want to do this. They're going to say, you know what, I'll help with their college, but the retirement is on their own. But there are plenty of people that may want to do this, or even grandparents that may want to do this and help fund and help them get off to a start. And we'll talk about this later on. I have a kind of interesting little number game here to show you, saying, why bother? The numbers are so small, but the numbers could actually end up being very large.
Okay.
So just to go through the key benefits, it provides a solution for overfunding 529s. It does give you a little bit of a symbolic value to help in both helping you with your children's education and a little maybe boost to start for their retirement. There's flexibility for the beneficiaries, and you can do any type of funding and any type of investments within the 529 plan, similar to what you're doing now. But
before we get into this math thing, hold on. You said something at the top of this section, which is the key benefits. You said it provides a solution for overfunded 529s. So when you're saying overfunded 529s, you're saying that the money was not entirely used for educational purposes. Is that what you're referring to for an overfunded? Okay.
Correct. So if you have leftover money
that
the 529 grew a lot more than what they ended up using for colleges. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why they did 35,000. I guess they figured that, it's a large enough money that'll make sense, but not too much that if you're over, you timed it a little bit better. So that's why it's lifetime of 35,000. But again, if you have multiple children and you went over for one, you can always move this to another 529 and use that for theirs. Of course, there are some of these limits we talked about. There's 5-year limits or some other limits. So we'll talk about, that if anybody has any specific questions.
Okay. All right. Are you ready to do the math?
Yeah. So let's look at the cool part about this. So let's say when we can look at it two ways. We can look at it where you just funded it early and you have money left over. And we'll talk about, let's say you've just about run out of the money, if you've timed it perfectly, but you know what? You can still use this vehicle as a Roth contribution. But let's just start with fact one. while the kids were young, and I'm saying kids, it can be anybody, but while the kids were young, you opened up this account 15 years. In the first few years, you funded it, and now the kids have gone to college and they're out of school and they're done. And let's say, for whatever example here, they're now 25 years old, and any of the money that you put into the 529 was done more than 5 years ago. And so now they have $35,000 left, and they're 25 years old. And so the next 5 years, okay, remember we're limited by $7,000 each year unless they up that. They'll now convert over to a Roth. So for the next 5 years, you're converting $7,000 over. So now they're 30 years old. And forget about any of the gains that they might have made over those 5 years. So let's just say now the account is worth $35,000. The new Roth account is now worth $35,000 because you've rolled over seven at age 26, 27 each year, and now it's worth $35,000. And now let's talk about, I love talking about the rule of 72. So for those that are out there, that if you make 7.2% on your money, it doubles every 10 years, the rule of 72. So let's say now they've invested in the Roth and they're 30 years old, so you can invest it kind of aggressively, and you earn 7.2% for the next 10 years and the 10 years after that. So let's see what happens to that. So that 35,000, they're now 30 years old. At 40, it would have grown to 70,000. At 50, we got another double, the rule of 72. It's grown to 140,000. At 60 now, it's 280,000. Again, 7.2% if it's invested. Historically, the stock market has done better than that, but I realize we're using 7.2%. So now at 60, this 35,000 has grown to almost 300,000. But let's say they wait until they're 70 for some reason. Now it's gone to $560,000. So even if they waited a little bit before 70, it's going to be $500,000 that this can grow to. And now the eyes start to open up a little bit because you can provide your children with a very nice retirement pot of money by doing this rollover. So, and there's one other way of doing this. So Matt, before I get to item 2, what do you think about this?
Wow. I mean, those numbers are, the rule of 72 is something that I just don't think enough people really truly know about, but, and I apologize for my ignorance here, Larry. I should probably know this, but maybe I even missed you say this. So when I convert a 529 plan, which if taken out for educational purposes, there aren't any taxes on the growth, am I still paying a Roth conversion tax from moving the money from a 529?
No, and that's a great point. I should have started right up at the top. And when you do the Roth conversion over here, it's a tax-free conversion. There's no taxes, there's no penalty. It goes in tax-free. So now you're changing this from a 529 plan where maybe the parent is the owner, and now you're converting this over. So now the child is the owner. So by 30, this money is all in their Roth account. So it's their Roth account subject to their own Roth rules, but it's their own Roth account.
That almost doesn't make sense. The government always wants their piece, brother. What am I missing?
Well, you're not missing anything. That's why they have these limits. These limits in here. But let's look at it. We'll take it even one step further, because let's say this person actually, I don't want to say played by the rules and put it all for college, but let's say now the child, we can pick, you can pick any age. So let's say the child is, and in New York State, you get a $10,000 annual deduction. We'll talk about some of the state issues because there is one little piece on here from a negative standpoint, depending upon what state you live in. So actually, let me address that now, and then we'll go, we can kind of come back. So this is great for federal purposes, but not all the states have agreed to this. And where we're located in New York State says, you want to convert this over, you got to pay me taxes on that. So New York State, you still have to pay taxes. It still may be worthwhile to do that. So there are 11 states which will treat this rollover into a into a Roth as a taxable event. The rest of the states, some states have no income tax, and there are other states that have said, no, we're going to abide by the federal rule on this. So you really want to see which state you're in, and if you're in a state where you have to pay taxes on it, you want to take a look. Does this still make sense for you to do? So that's the one caveat from a state standpoint. But let's get back to some of the planning items. So let's say now you kind of know that you have enough money for college, but you're in a nice position and you're able to provide something else for your child or your grandchild. So now, remember, you got to plan this 5 years in advance. You could start putting away $7,000 5 years before you're going to do the first Roth conversion, and then 7,000 the year after. So you can actually put money in here, not for college, but for the Roth, specifically knowing that you're going to convert this over 5 years down the road, or you may convert this over 5 years down the road. So there's nothing that says that you can't do this as long as you abide by the 15-year rule and the 5-year rule. Wow. Was I clear with that?
That was super clear. Yeah, no, that was super, super clear. Yep.
So it's a nice little planning tool. And if you have, multiple children and you can do this for multiple accounts, and a lot of people may say, you know what, I just paid for their college. I don't want to, or I can't afford, or I don't want to give them another $35,000 to put into a Roth. And of course, they may be working and they may be able to qualify for their own Roth at that time. So they don't want you're not going to want to do this earlier, but there may be ways of doing this. And there may be ways, especially for grandparents who want to do this. It's a great way of doing it. So it's something that everyone should think about if they have young children or children in their teens or even their 20s, and see if this makes sense. So again, purpose is really for college and for leftover money, and see if there are ways of taking advantage of these well within the rules to be able to provide a great benefit and provide a great retirement account for your kids or your grandkids when they're about to retire.
So, Larry, this is one of the things I love about this show, right? For so many years in financial services, all of this information was really gate-kept, right? Not you, but a lot of financial services professionals weren't talking about these tips and these tricks and these strategies publicly to make it so that, everybody could really learn about this, which is just the reason I'm saying that is because this is the sort of stuff that you come to this podcast for. This is the reason why you use Heller Wealth Management, because this is who he is. This is what his team does, is they're consistently finding great planning techniques to help you get even more ahead. And if you're not working with a financial planner who keeps all of these different moving parts in mind when they're sitting down with you, you could miss huge opportunities. A $500,000 opportunity for you and your grandkids. All right, Larry, somebody wants to reach out. Where should they go, my friend?
Yeah, so just a little caveat. So again, if they can reach out to us, because there are some of the limits that apply. So if you are thinking about this, please reach out to us at 631-248-3600, or go to my website, hellowealthmanagement.com, and click on schedule a time to meet with myself and one of our advisors, and we'll gladly talk about this and whatever other planning you'd like to talk about.
If you are planning to have children, if you have children, if you have grandchildren, what an amazing financial planning strategy to truly help you. And of course, there's all sorts of other moving parts. This is not meant to be ubiquitous amongst everybody who's listening. You do need to sit down with a certified financial planner and somebody who truly understands this. But when you have somebody like Larry and his team in your corner, it can really truly make a life-changing difference and not just you, but all of your family and your legacy to come. So with that, please go to hellerwealthmanagement.com. And for Larry and all of us here at Heller Wealth Management, we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.